Hey guys, welcome back to another Friday episode, Strange Conspiracies. Today we have David. Had a great conversation with David last night, and you're gonna love this episode because David, he's gonna share some stories from his life, some things that have happened to him, spiritual experiences that maybe some of you have faced as well. So let's dive right in and listen to what David has to share with us.
Good evening, Cody and family. I want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to share these experiences. And there's a wonderful community that's developed here with Josh, Dano, and your channels, Cody. It feels like home to me, brother. And I feel comfortable here. So anyway, my name's David, and I'm down here off of Bull Shoals. Um, I'm a Christian, but my path hasn't always been on the up. Uh, I'd like to preface with one of my greatest teachers and influences was my grandmother, Grandma Wallace, who really, really instilled in me the power of prayer and God's grace and the importance of having a relationship with Jesus. I wished I would have stayed that course. Unfortunately, I made some bad decisions through life. Through experimenting, kind of looking for a shortcut to spirituality, and there is none. Well, there is one. It's called prayer, and that is the best method I recommend. But in the course of that path, um, I went into a treatment facility, and after about a 10 to 15 year struggle, um, I always knew that wasn't the path for me, but I go into this place, and within the first couple days, there was a new fellow that came in from Cairo, Illinois, and I tried making conversation with him. I always try to connect with people, and he told me he's from Cairo, and we kind of had a funny back and forth. I um, recall that it was a few days later. We were in the cafeteria, and everybody in this facility struggling. We were all a mess. Despite the fact I still I always prayed and tried to keep some contact with God, no matter how dark things got. And I have no doubt in my mind that He's been with me and carried me through the times when I couldn't do so myself. So anyway, in this facility, this uh, we have three meals a day, and in the cafeteria, I went to sit down beside a younger guy who I really felt compelled to make a connection with. He seemed like he was having a hard time, and I sat down. We just started talking. We just said grace, and we're eating, and this fellow from Cairo that I'm going to call Craig, and God bless you, brother. I'm sorry I can't remember your first name, but um, he came over to the table, and he was upset that the guy I'm talking to was in his chair. And I said, brother, there's like 20 other chairs right here. I mean, they're all open. And he said, no, I'm not talking to you. And we had a confrontation. And um, side note, it's really funny that, man, they brought the heat down on me. And I didn't initiate anything, but I wasn't there to prove how tough I was, but I was there to get healing and get on the right path with God. But I come from a long line of people who find it hard to, we don't like bullies. So anyway, staff came, separated us. They put me on code red, DEFCON 5 alert. They said, one more, if you look at somebody wrong, David, you're gone. I'm like, I really took it as a spiritual attack. It seemed like there was a force that did not want me to be in that place at that time. So for the next 3 days, I was pretty ticked off. As usual, I tend to have issues with authority sometimes, and could be because my father was a preacher my first 12 years of life, but I love you, Dad. So I prayed for this guy, this brother, for 3 days, and by the dinner time of the third day, I was completely blown away. I'm in line, and he's one person behind me, and I was thinking, oh man, please God, please don't let him do anything foolish. I need to be here. I want to be here. And I just kept saying that prayer, please just protect me and keep him in his place. Well, when I went to get my silverware, he kind of darted over. I'm like, oh man, here we go. And I looked at him, and he looked at me and he said, hey brother, I want to apologize. And like instantly tears welled up and are rolling down my cheek. I said, man, I want to give you a hug, brother. Pulled it in, and I said, I apologize too, man. I said, we're all here, we're all sick, and we're just trying to get better, man. We're just trying to get back on the path that God wants us to be on. And he said, yes. I said, please sit down with us and break bread, man. So he did. And we sat down, and I said grace. And I was so grateful for God showing me the power of prayer right there in front of my eyes, 3 days. And boom, I was like, wow, truly a miracle from where we were 3 days prior. So after we said grace, he put his silverware down and said, man, I don't know why, but he said, God's put it on my heart to tell you, can I tell you something crazy? And I said, yeah, by all means. He said, you're going to think I'm nuts. But he said, and I really don't know why I'm telling you this. I really don't know, other than God's putting it on my heart. I said, let it flow, bro. He said, I was in the Army back in the 80s, and I was stationed in Germany. And he said, I had a car that would do 160 on the Autobahn, 150, and he said, I did it all the time. He said, I had every drug that was known to man of the best quality. And he said, from all over the world, right there in Germany, easy access for us guys in the service at that time. He said, I had a beautiful girlfriend. So I was living like a king. And I was really plowing through the snow. And he said, I remember I was just on top of the world, man. I felt like a king. And he said, one night I'd went to bed and I had this crazy, bizarre dream. And at this point, I must digress. Um, Before I went into this treatment center, 15 years prior, I had a dream where I could see myself sleeping. And then in the next instant, I was in my body and had woken up to somebody trying to grab my ankles. And I freaked out and in the dream, and I jackknifed up and I started kicking this thing. It kind of looked humanoid, but the description I would give is that Bram Stoker's Dracula, and the younger Dracula that wore the blue glasses, this thing had that appearance, very much so. The face may have been a little more gaunt, but it was the eyes that completely freaked me out. they were like serpent-eyed. They were slits. And man, when I saw that, I was like, oh God. And I gave this thing a kick and I woke up. And when I did, tears were streaming down my face. I was completely shook and unnerved, and I wasn't in a good place. And I was like, dude, what was that all about? Because I've had several dreams through the course of my life that um, were not just your average dreams. I think that's a gift I got from my grandmother Wallace, actually. So we're of mostly Scottish heritage, with a little bit of Mackimac Indian. Um, anyway, I'm an artist trapped in a color guy's body, so we had an artist pad on the table, and I was pretty good at drawing portraits at the time, and I drew this thing's portrait, and I had to show it to my girlfriend at the time and my roommate. I was like, guys, have you ever had a dream with this thing in it? And they're like, no, that looks horrible. Like, dude, that's terrible. Uh, Sorry you had a dream like that, you know? And I was like, it sounds very benign compared to the feeling that it gave me when I woke up from this dream. I was scared. I was scared out of my wits. Um, you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out this was basically a demon attacking me in my sleep. Now, at this point, I had been clean from drugs and booze for, I'm going to say, it was a good 4 years at that point. I had a 4.5 year run where I was good. So I, that struck me odd that, you know, okay, I couldn't say, well, it was just some weird drug induced dream. And I've always been into my prayer and read the Bible and try to develop as good a relationship as I can with Creator, with God. So fast forward 15 years later, I'm getting ready to check into this treatment center, and I was cleaning up my apartment where I lived, and I knew family was going to be coming in, so I wanted to clean it up really good and not traumatize them any further than I probably already had. And so in doing so, I came across that artist pad from 15 years prior, and I was like, oh man, I remember this, and completely forgot about that dream until about 4 pages in. After happy reminiscing, I saw that portrait that I drew, and I slammed it shut. And I was like, "Oh God!" It was the first thing to come out of my mouth again, and I was like, "Oh man!" I totally got the willies, and I ripped the page out. You know, I'm a smoker. And I went outside and I burned that thing like instantly and prayed for some minutes. And so now we're back at the table. I'm gonna have a little bit of a jump around here, and now I want to take you back to inside the treatment center where I'm having a conversation with Craig, and he's telling me, yeah, I had this weird dream. I'm like, yeah. So this is fresh in my mind. 3 days before Craig and I are having this conversation, I burned that portrait. He said, I was dreamt that I saw myself sleeping, and then I was in my body. And I was like, what? He said, yeah, I know it sounds weird. I'm like, no, go ahead. He said, I woke up because somebody was grabbing my ankles. I'm like, no way. He goes, and he's not getting that I had the same experience yet. And he's like, yeah, no. He said, I swear to God, man. He said, just listen. I'm like, he goes, this thing had me by the ankles and I was kicking at him. I was trying to get away and I couldn't figure out what's going on. And I said, it was a white dude, wasn't it? He goes, yeah, it was a white dude. I said, yeah. And he's looking at me like, how do you know? And I said, I had the same dream, brother. He's like, no way. I go, dude, do you have long hair? He goes, yeah. dark hair. I said, yep. I said, and on his face, he said, yeah, he had a mustache and a goatee. Like, I said, yeah. He says, but it was, and I finished the sentence. I said, it was the eyes that shook you because it looked like a serpent. He had demon eyes. And he goes, yeah, man. And he slammed his hands on the table, shot out of his seat, and just looking at me like, dude, what's going on right now? And I was out of my chair and I was like, behold the awesome power of God to reveal this to us. I said, Craig, I said, this wouldn't have been like what year would you guess this to have happened? He said, man, it had to have been around like 87, 88. I'm like, oh my gosh, dude. I said, we're talking about the same time period, if not the same year. I wish I could tell you the month. He said, this is just blowing my mind, man. I said, this is an affirmation. I said, we're just completely mind blown. I said, dude, you're on the other side of the world. You're in Germany. I'm in Illinois. And we both have the same experience. I said, there's no such thing as coincidences, brother. Excuse me. And I said, man, we got to pray now. And we sat back down and held hands and prayed. And I had I had a wise old friend that used to tell me, says, well, anything that makes you pray can't be all bad for you, which could be debatable, but I did a lot of praying after that. And just what an amazing, mind-blowing affirmation uh, that there is a spiritual war, A, and that drugs are a gateway to demons, in both of Craig and I's opinion. And in a weird way, I've come to the belief that it's like a bad evil communion of sorts when somebody takes something meat or mind altering into their body. It's in a way it's a bad communion, man, and we're opening the door to ourselves. Whenever we lose our will, our volition, that's it. We open that up. There's just as we are assigned angels, I believe that there are also dark forces that are assigned to us to keep us from reaching a better connection with God and to be a better person to reach our true spiritual potential, you know. And it is war, man. It's war out here. So I don't recall a whole lot else from that 30-day experience besides the fact that, man, I really wish I could have kept Craig's number and been able to stay in touch with him. That was really a life changing event for me. Just absolutely. A lot of people that I've told this to really can't wrap their heads around it. Even people that have heard a lot of stories, a lot of strange things. There's people that I know that are very familiar with the strange, and I've never heard anything like it. If there's anybody out there who's ever experienced something like that, and I want to say the common link was probably cocaine that that demon was associated with. So I don't know if anyone can relate to that or has had a similar experience, but I know if Craig and I experienced it, that others have too.
Man, wouldn't that be wild if somebody hears this, calls in, and shares the same exact story?
Oh, oh, yes. That would completely blow my mind, and that's not easy these days. Yes, brother, that would completely blow my mind. Yes.
Man, and I know, you know, just God bless the fact that you went to that treatment center and you were able to make those connections and those dots. And Sounds like it helped you in your journey with your connection with our Creator.
Absolutely, Cody. Yes, sir. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. For anybody out there who's struggling with addiction issues of any kind, um, it was a 15-year long struggle for me. I mean, I've been shot, uh, and I just went through hell, literally. And you would think after certain breaking points that one would come to their senses and say, this isn't for me. I apparently wasn't wired that way. And whatever had a hold of me was very powerful. However, I used to tell God how bad my problems, how big my problems are, and now I can tell my problems and that the challenges I face, how big my God is. And we know who has the last word and the ultimate say here. So never, as much as try as hard as I may, it's my daily struggles to try not to put God in a box, Cody, and just keep this thing out of the way and just do the best I can and try to be an example, man, of God's will and grace.
Absolutely, man. That's powerful. I know you also had something else you were going to share. It sounds like the story where you were in a bookstore. Are you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And before I go into that, what saved me was humbling myself. I'm so sorry, I forgot to mention it's been a long day. I'm nervous. I always get the best results in prayer when I'm kneeling down and humbling myself in that humbling position. And I was on my hands and knees for at least 6, 7 hours begging Jesus. I said, I know that you are the one. I was told that you are the one who cast demons, and if you can just get me to ground zero, Lord, I will never go that path again. And it wasn't like it wasn't anything noticeable. I didn't notice a thing except some hours later at how clear my thinking was. And I was like, something's changed, something's different. And I started noticing other things. Hours on prayer, begging Jesus. It might have happened in the first few seconds. I don't know, but I know I prayed fervently with great passion. And I just want to tell you, I'm a living witness, a walking miracle that God answers prayer. I want to really stress that. Um, so another dream experience that I had connects with my Native American heritage, which is kind of funny. I've always felt a really strong pull towards Native American things and their philosophy and their lifestyle. And when we were kids and we played cowboys and Indians, I was always the Indian. And I had a dream, and you don't have to be Sigmund Freud to figure this out, but I was I was lost. I was in complete darkness, and I'm walking on a path, dirt road, and I was barefoot, and the only way I could tell I was on this road was if I could feel grass and weeds underneath my feet, and then I would get back on the gravel. And it seemed like I'd been walking forever, like 1,000 years, man. And I was like, God, what did I do wrong to end up here? Probably could have been a number of things. Please, Lord, get me out of this place. Uh, the next thing I remember is in this dream, I see a dot of firelight, and I can hear voices and music. Excuse me. And I'm sure I gave a little hop for joy, and I was like, yes. So, man, I'm trucking now towards the fire, And the closer I get, I definitely hear voices of guys and gals and music playing. And I'm like, the music even sounded good. I was like, man, I had the jackpot here. And I'm an old retired deadhead. So the closer I get, this guy steps out from behind a vehicle, and it's somebody that I know from my hometown that I went to high school with, that I actually used to see at Grateful Dead concerts all the time, which I found really odd because we'd had some discussions, and he was never really into his spirituality. Um, he, he said it was cool that I was, but he just couldn't relate, And anywho, Pat, God bless you, brother. I love you, man. My brother Pat steps out from behind a pickup truck and he goes, Dave, what are you doing here? I said, man, I am so glad to see you. I gave him a hug and a high five. I said, bro, I have been lost in the wilderness for so long. Even just saying it's like so obvious what the dream meant, right? So I said, you have no idea. I said, what are you guys doing out here? He says, hold on a second. And he reaches behind his back with both arms. And when he brings them up, try to get back in the camera, when he brings them up over his head and touches them behind his head, what he was bringing up was an eagle feather in his right hand. And in the left hand, he had this braided grass looking stuff, which was sweetgrass, I guess. When he connected the two, they burst into flames. And I said, dude, you're burning the eagle feather. And he just looked at me and smiled, this knowing grin. And I woke up. And when I woke up, I had this profound, heavy, heavy feeling on my heart, man. It was literally like on my chest. I was like, dude, what was that all about? I mean, it's kind of obvious. Okay, I've taken some really dark, bad paths in my day, and I came out of it and ran into Pat. But there was so much more to this that I really felt like I needed to have answers for. So I started networking. And at this time, I'm living in Minnesota. I start networking with my friends and my good brother Al. I love you, man. Um, says to me one day, "Hey, man, I ran into this shaman and went to a sweat lodge last weekend." I'm like, "Dude, you didn't call your boy." And I was giving him a hard time. He said, "Well, it's kind of a thing where the shaman has to invite you." I said, "Hold on, man." I said, "Is this guy legit?" And Al said, "Yeah, I think so, man." He said, "It was quite an interesting experience." I said, "I need to talk to this man." I said, "Will you ask him the next time you go if he'll meet with me? And all I need is 5 minutes, and I just want his opinion on this prayer." I said, "There's something about it that just will not let me go." He said, "Yeah, absolutely, man. I'll ask him." That and it wasn't a every weekend thing that they did this, so I'm thinking it was like a month later, and he goes to the sweat lodge. I kept reminding him I stayed on. I'm like, "Man, don't forget." Well, he comes back from that sweat lodge and he said, "Man, I'm sorry, Dave. He said, that's not the way this works." I said, "Come on, man." He goes, "No." He said, "You don't find him, he finds you." I said, "What a crock." I thought you said this guy was legit, and I was really giving him a hard time, kind of. And I said, "Look, man, $50, dude. I'll pay him $50 just for 5 minutes of his time. Um, that's all. $50, $10 a minute." He's like, "I'll tell him, but it's probably going to tick him off." I said, "Thanks, buddy." So he come back after the next time, and he said, "Man, you did. You took off the shaman, Dave. I'm not sure how smart that was." I said, "Okay. Is he going to meet with me?" And he hands me the phone number, and I'm like, Awesome. Dude, here we go. He said, hold on, Dave. He said, there's rules. If you lose the paper, it's over. He said, if you get sick, it's too bad. He said, if you get a flat tire on the way to meet him, forget about it. Lose the number, burn it, forget about it, and move on. I was like, okay, fine, man. The day comes, and I'm so fired up. I am so stoked. And man, I'm ready. I am so ready. And I called him up and I said, hey, I'm on my way. And he told me exactly the same thing that Alan told me. You get sick, you get a flat tire, the sky falls on your head. He said, lose my number, man. It wasn't meant to be. This isn't really how we're supposed to do this. I said, okay. But I'm like, I'm going to be there. We hang up the phone, I'm jetting, and I hit this stretch of highway, and there was literally nothing for like 10 miles radius, just nothing. And I did not, we didn't have cell phones at that time. And I'm trucking along, and I'm just, man, I am so happy. Finally, I get to get this off my chest and move on.com. Dude, I hit this 10-mile stretch, pow. I didn't just get a flat. The tire blew. It disintegrated, man. I pull over. I'm like, it's going to take more than that to keep me from getting to the shaman. I jump out, man. I was like NASCAR. Jack that sucker up, threw the spare on, let it down. The spare was flat. I was like, dude, you have to be kidding me. No vehicles came by at all. I ended up having to walk a long time. And a car did end up picking me up hitchhiking so I could make it to a phone to call a buddy. I was so disappointed and so like just beside myself. I thought, I'm just gonna have to let this go and put it in God's hands. I don't know what else to do at this point. The native the native path isn't producing the results I want, which was immediately, of course. So anyway, um, fast forward about a year and a half later, and this little town, name of this little town was Chaska. Right across the Minnesota River was Shakopee, and I was across the river watching a Packers Viking game, which was always a hoot. And on my way back from the game, heading towards the bridge in Chaska, there was this little log cabin called, like, I don't know, the Indian Souvenir Shop or something. It didn't really seem to have the depth that I was looking for, so I'd never stopped before, but I felt super compelled to pull into this place at this moment. So I did go inside, open the door, the little bell rings, and then there's a nice lady sitting behind the counter with glasses reading her book. And she looked up and said, well, hi, honey. How are you doing today? I said, I'm good, thank you. I said, I just came in to see what you have here. I said, do you have any books by chance? And she said, oh, do we have books? She said, right over there. And there was a room the size of an average living room, completely filled with books, man, from floor to ceiling, wall to wall. And I was like in heaven. I thought, I'm going to find what I'm looking for here. I'm going to finally get the answers I'm looking for. Eagle Feather was at the top of the list. So I'm going through books. I found one that kind of jumped out at me and checked the contents, and it actually had everything in the contents that I was looking for. I'm like, man, I hit the jackpot. Thank you, God. That's right. So I'm deep into this, getting into this chapter on the eagle feather, and it's talking about transcending to a higher consciousness level and a closer relationship with Creator. And I'm like, yeah, this is sounding really positive and good. That's what I wanted to hear. I, I think I had some reservations. I was kind of worried that maybe the dream had some bad connotations to it because it felt so heavy. About the time I'm really getting into this chapter, I was only a couple minutes in, man, but I'm sucked in, and I noticed out of my peripheral vision an older gentleman walking towards me. I'm like, hmm. Um, I've always been an observer, and so I'm checking dude's clothing out. He has this immaculate, I mean, like perfect suit, uh, and his shoes look brand new. They didn't have a mark on. They just looked brand new. I bet if I looked at the soles, there wasn't a mark on them. I'm like, this guy dressed immaculately to come down to the bookstore, and I was like, poor guy. He's lonely. He's probably trying to make a good impression on the lady behind the counter. Bless his heart. And I was like, oh. And he walks up to me. I'm like, huh? He said, hey, hi there. How you doing today? I said, I'm good, sir. How are you doing? He said, I'm doing all right, thanks. He said, so what are you reading? And I thought, I was a little taken aback. I thought that was kind of personal. I was like, oh, I'm being vague, and I just want to really kind of get rid of him and get back into this book. And I said, oh, it's just a book on some Native American things. He said, oh. He said, that's interesting. I said, yeah. I said, you have a nice day, sir. God bless you, and it's been good talking to you. And thought that would shoo him off, and he didn't budge. He said, so why are you reading that? I'm like, okay, man, you're kind of getting in my business now. Um, it's maybe above your pay grade, I'm thinking. I had a silly dream, and I'm really playing it off and candy coating. And I'm like, I thought maybe I could find some books to help me out, figure out what the dream was. And he's like, now that's interesting. He said, so what was the dream? I'm like, oh my gosh, make it stop. I'm like, dang. And I can remember telling myself, Dave, don't be a jerk. He's a lonely old man. He's a sweet old man. Just wants to talk to somebody. Be nice. I said, hey. So I tell him the dream. And I get done. I gave him enough details that he got it. Um, and when I got done, I said, now, if you'll excuse me, sir, I said, I'd really like to get back into this book now. And he looked at me and he said, you're going to be okay. It humored me. And I said, well, hey, thanks, buddy. I appreciate that. He said, I mean it. He said, you're going to be all right. It was kind of weird the way the whole tone and calmness, but seriousness about, as if he knew. And I'm still hung up on poor lonely old man. So I said, well, God bless you, sir. You take care. He said, you too. I get look back in the book. I'm like, okay, where was I? I'm like, yeah, okay, this paragraph here. And I'm like, I read about 2 words and I closed the book. I'm like, who is this guy? Where'd this dude come from? Like, I, now I can't even focus on what I was in. See, man, now you distracted me, and you're distracting me from finding out what was the meaning to some of the things in this dream. And I thought maybe this guy is like some kind of spiritual distraction. Even though he only said good things to me, I was like, what? I was really confused and perplexed. I'm like, who is this guy in the 1930s Untouchables immaculate suit? And I took the book up to the counter, and the lady said, oh, you found something you like? I said, yes, I did. And I put $20 down. I said, hey, where's that little old man? Where'd the little old man go? And she said, I'm sorry. I said, sweetie, I said, you had to have heard me talking to him for like 5 minutes over here. It was like the Spanish Inquisition. You had to, surely you heard us talking. And she said, honey, there's no one in this store but you and I. I said, that can't be. And when I said, look, I know I'm not crazy, that was her cue to real carefully fold her book and set it down. She took her glasses off, set them on the book, and she pushes her rolling secretarial chair back and gets up and real casually steps back, and her hand is reaching for the phone. And I said, please don't call the police. I said, I'm telling you, I'm not crazy. I'm not doped up or anything. I said, I'm having a spiritual experience. I said, I'm sorry to lay this on you. You're just having your normal day. But I said, there's something's going on here. I said, that guy was in here and I was talking to him and he's just as real as you are right now to me, right here, right now. And she said, sweetie, there's that little bell above the door. I said, yeah. She said, you remember hearing that ring when you came in? I said, yeah. She said, did you hear it ring afterwards? I said, actually, no, I didn't. She's like, yeah, that's because it's just you and I, sweetie. I said, there's $20. I said, will you please bring that up and give me my change? And I just want to go out the front door. And I'm not calling you a liar, but I had to see for myself that there's no little old man hanging outside the store. I go out there, man. You can see for miles. It's straight and it's flat, and there's no cars and there's no houses. And I'm just completely blown away. I'm like, dude, what just happened? I walked back inside. I said, I don't know what's going on. I kind of started to wonder if I was losing my mind, to be honest with you, Cody. And she said, sweetie, what did this man look like? I said, he was an older gentleman. He would have been like in his 70s. I said, but the suit was immaculate. It was like he stepped off the set of The Untouchables. I mean, the suit was perfect. And remember, my dad had his work clothes and his old holy sweatshirts and hoodies and stuff, and then he had his suits that he would wear, and he was really particular about his presentation at church and that. So I kind of was paying attention. I said, even the guy's shoes looked just brand new, like straight out of the 30s. I was like, yeah, it was crazy. I said he was kind of dark complected, and he had high cheekbones and a kind of a arched nose. And as those words left my mouth, I was like, oh my God, if you put a headdress and threw some fringed leather on my man, dude, he was a native. And he gave the book, and I I don't really know exactly what to make of that. I cannot, that one, I cannot, I try to see things through the biblical lens, brother. And that one I kind of struggled with. And the only thing I could come up with was that possibly like a guardian angel, because I actually did, for a period, studied shamanism. And I don't know. I, I don't understand. And just because I don't understand it doesn't mean that it's not real. But all I could figure was like this. It's like a guardian angel letting me know, giving me some comfort and peace, telling me it's going to be okay, in the form of something that I was seeking. I wanted to talk with a native that knew the old ways, and so only a couple of people that I've shared that with can have really give me like a wow, man, that's an awesome encounter that you had, and what a really what a great story, man. Most other people are like, there's probably medication for that, Dave. But, um, these things are an affirmation to me, and meeting Craig and that experience was like, man, just the fact that I had prayed for him only for 3 days, and here there was a complete turnaround to where I was pretty sure we're going to go to fisticuffs, and it turns out we became brothers. We gave hug, man. We're breaking bread for the rest of our time there, and that's just an example of the power of prayer to me, and also that there is a spiritual warfare going on. The old man in the store, Cody, I don't know, brother. I don't have a definitive for that, but
Man, that was your spiritual. Maybe he's a spiritual guide. Somebody God sent to, like you said, give you words of affirmation and send you down the road. So that's wild. I mean, that's definitely amazing, and I appreciate you taking the time and coming on here and sharing this. I know you said at the beginning you were nervous, but I couldn't really tell because you man, that was powerful, and I really appreciate you sharing that with me and also with everyone who's going to hear this. And so, man, thank you for your time and just stepping out of your comfort zone and sharing that with us.
absolutely. My whole 63 years on planet Earth, I can't remember the first few, but Cody, it's been a wild ride, man. I've had wild stuff happen and experiences since I was a kid, about 8, 9. And my
Man,
grandmother, I jokingly say she was an 8-day-a-week Christian. She was so devoted, man. Such a beautiful spirit, beautiful woman. That she had experiences that opened my mind to the world of possibilities. That just because her experiences did not fit into her belief system, because she was very adamant that the Bible specifically says we don't entertain soothsayers and sorcery and spirits, familiar spirits, things of that nature, right? So even though that was her concrete belief, she still had these wild encounters, Cody. Like, if you ever want to check any of those out, I'd be happy to share them with you, man. But it was her sharing those with me that really opened my mind to the fact that there's a lot more going on here, brother, than what we're hearing out of the textbooks in our brainwash education,
absolutely. Yeah. And man, it's definitely like you said, you've said it a few times, is it's definitely spiritual, in the battle. That's a real battle that's happening right now. So
Amen, brother.
only good and evil. And so we
Yeah,
can
man.
just hope that we stay on the side of good and look to our creator for strength when we don't have it ourselves. So, but
Stay prayed up, like Brother Josh says, man. That's
absolutely. Absolutely. And I appreciate you being here, David, and thank you for sharing. So what'd you guys think about that? Just hearing David talk, I could listen to the guy talk all day. Love his voice. Love the way he tells stories that he's had, his experiences, and the spiritual encounters he's faced through life. It's really hard to understand unless you've had an experience like that, what that does to a person, with really your connection with the Creator, with God. And so we're thankful that David was able to share this story with us. If you guys have had similar dreams, encounters, email us. Our email is strangeconspiracies88@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your story, to share it, just like we did with David. And we're so thankful for this community, for you guys, and we're so thankful that you watch the show, support the guest, and really help build this community out. So we hope to see you guys on the next one. Don't forget, Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Central Time, we're going to have our next live show. I really look forward to seeing you there. And guys, call me, If you've been on a live show, my number's there. Text me and email me, especially if you or anyone you know has a story you'd love to share. So until next time, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Strange Conspiracies.